All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to Fast Forward, the future of business. My name is Eric Kavanagh. I will be your moderator for today's show, which is designed to explore the innovative technologies that are changing the way business is done. Folks, we're very excited. This has been a year in the planning. I'm very fired up to introduce you to my co-presenters here today, Jim Harris and Ronald van Loon, dialing in from different countries they are. We're going to dive right in, folks. First of all, a quick nod to our sponsor. Big thanks to SAP for sponsoring Fast Forward, the future of business. And with that, I'm going to hand the keys over to Jim Harris. He's going to tell us about the crisis and the plan. Jim Harris, take it away.
Thanks so much, Eric. Organizations are facing a crisis today because of disruptive innovation. So what is it? So think about this. 93% of car accidents are due to driver error. So there is such great news for us because 450,000 people aren't going to be killed every year on North American roads, and another 2.3 million people aren't going to be in hospitals maimed by car accidents. That's the absolutely great news. But think about the downside. If you sell auto insurance, whether you're a broker or an insurance firm, you're going to witness a $500 billion a year market disappear in 7 to 10 years. I mean, you will have insurance, but when you buy your Tesla, the insurance will come with the Tesla because Tesla at wholesale will insure its artificial intelligence, its AI, its autonomous system. So I'm going to play a little video here, and in this video, you're going to see a dash cam in a Tesla in a Scandinavian country. And the autonomous system is going to show the accident about to happen before it happens. And so let's just have a quick look.
There it goes.
Oh my God. In other words, the autonomous system identified the problem before I could see anything wrong with it. Now, how much is your family worth to you? It's a kind of rhetorical question because in 7 to 10 years, knowing that an autonomous system can save your life, can save your family's life, what does the value of used cars go to that don't have autonomous systems? Now, I was giving a presentation to a group of CEOs, and in the group was one CEO who owned 16 used car lots and car dealerships. And he said, you know what, Tesla and autonomous systems are less than 1% of the market. So really, you're wasting my time talking about this minor trend. So I put this next slide in for him after the break. Because we took a break. So this is the sale of large luxury cars in the U.S. in 2014. And you can see that the king of the castle is Mercedes-Benz. But already Tesla Model S is second with 18,000 units a year sold. Let's fast forward to 2015. Oops, Tesla Model S is now the dominant large luxury car in the U.S. with 26,000. Mercedes has fallen to 21,000 and change. And then fast forward to 2016, oops, Mercedes has further collapsed to 18,000 units, while Tesla has accelerated to 30,000 units. Now, the reason this is so important is just 10 years ago, Lexus represented 2% of Toyota's sales by unit volume, but 33% of the company's profitability. So large luxury car sales represent a disproportionate share of automaker profitability. So can you hear the huge sucking sound as Tesla takes profitability out of the auto industry? Do you think the CEO that owns those 16 car dealerships can really afford to dismiss it as irrelevant because it's less than 1% of the market? No, very tiny shifts can have a profound impact on industries and profitability. This is one of the reasons we all have to pay attention to disruption. So think about this. In 7 to 10 years' time, you'll go to work You'll be in the back seat or in the passenger seat, and your car will be driving you to work, and you'll be reading or texting or sleeping or Skyping or on a webinar like this one. And then when you arrive at work, you're going to say to your car, go forth and earn your keep. You know, you're going to put it into the autonomous vehicle pool for Uber. So think about this. What does the value of parking lots go to if we don't park our cars that drive us to work? You know, in downtown Toronto, where I'm from, you pay $40 a day for parking, and people can buy a parking spot for up to $100,000. So what does the value of parking lots go to when we have autonomous systems? Or think about this, if we have almost 500,000 fewer deaths and almost 2.5 million fewer maimings and serious injuries, what about ambulance capacity? You know, what about our emergency rooms in terms of their capacity? If you're building a new hospital, should you really have a kind of accordion ability with the emergency room? So all of these things, just one little technology, autonomous vehicles, is affecting a whole slew of industries. So really disruption is about identifying the disruption before it hits your company, before it hits your industry. And it's not just, you know, we've talked about these few. These are executives who were asked, are you going to have massive or moderate disruption in the next 12 months? And here you can see across a huge swath of different industries, everybody is recognizing that there is going to be disruption. So this is really important because whoever your digital partner is had better be flexible in terms of being able to offer a wide array of tools and strategies for you to adopt if you need to. They have to be fast. Are they agile and able to help you move along? They have to be flexible, having multiple offerings, and they have to be a friendly organization to work with. So whatever digital partner you take, this is an absolutely critical approach. And I'm going to turn it over to Eric now.
All right, now we'll take it over, and folks, we're going to talk about a lot of different technologies on the show today. The whole concept is that there is a confluence of technologies that is fundamentally transforming business, how things get done. This is what they call digital transformation. It's happening now all around us. And I want to share a slide which I think is the ultimate quote for our program, which, by the way, is a year in the making. We've been planning this. Here's William Gibson. The future is here already. It's just not very evenly distributed. Well, the corollary is also true. That means the past is still here, and it's all around us. So in business, what is the past? Well, it's paper-based systems, right? Think about this. For the past 1,000 years, contracts have been certified on paper. For the next 1,000 years, contracts will be certified in the blockchain. That's why the blockchain is such a big deal. Think about title companies, mortgage title companies. All they do is certify that a transaction took place. That's it. That's what title companies do. Well, when a smart contract in a blockchain can do that at virtually no charge, what does that mean for the future of the mortgage title insurance business? It's a big deal. This is why we're talking about the magnitude of transformation that's taking place right now. And here's another great quote. This one really changed my life, quite frankly. I read an article on a plane interviewing Steve Jobs when he talked about how most people think of design as a sort of veneer that goes outside the product. He said that's not the way we look at it. Design is integral to the function. So form and function are one in the eyes of Steve Jobs, or were. And look what he did. The man came back, took over Apple after getting booted off his own company, stopped the clones, if you remember that back in the 90s, and what happened? Well, he took technology by storm. Everybody has an iPhone, or almost everybody these days. It's an absolutely dominating force. And we're going to talk about design thinking on today's webcast here, which is a special way of really trying to view the big picture to understand which problems to solve and how to go about solving them. There's another fun quote. This is actually from a friend of mine who studied with the Dalai Lama's right-hand man. He said to me just a few weeks ago, and he studied with this guy for a couple of years, he said, things don't happen quickly until they do. And think about being disruptive. Think about that video that Jim shared at the top of the hour here. Things like car accidents happen very quickly when they happen. Of course, it can take years or decades before it happens to you, and you don't ever want that to happen, and that's the idea. You don't want to be disrupted. You don't want to be blindsided. That's why we're putting out this call to action to all of you right now to explore these technologies, to take this very seriously, because just about every industry is going to be upended or sideswiped somehow, some way. And if you want some more background on Jimmy Malone, I'll use it in this next slide, which is one of my favorite images ever. Just remember, as a disruptor, if you're going to be the pioneer, what's the old joke? You can always tell the pioneers by the arrowheads in their backs, right? No good deed goes unpunished. This slide, actually, this image comes from a story about Johnny Cash. When he wanted to come back, I think in the early 90s, and do an album where he did a bunch of covers, some of you may have heard that. He covered Nirvana, for example, and several others. He went around to all the producers in Nashville, all the people that he had made a lot of money for over the years, and they all said no. And so ultimately, it was the guy, I believe, who was a bit of an industrial rock producer who said, I'll work for you, I'll pick you up, the guy from 9 Inch Nails, Trent Reznor, the producer. He picked them up, and it was a wild success, and when after it was successful, they ran this picture, American Recordings, and Johnny Cash would like to acknowledge the National Music Establishment in Country Radio for your support. Of course, he's being facetious. So let's take a step back here and think about this. Design thinking, what does it really mean? Well, remember, you could be disrupted any day, any time. All kinds of forces are converging around us. We'll talk about social, mobile, analytics, cloud in just a minute, and think about things like machine learning, for example. So you want to ask the hard questions to identify which problems you need to solve. This is not an easy thing to do, and you need to take time to do it. Be prepared to sacrifice sacred cows, for example, and I love this concept of the hippos, the highest paid person's opinion in the room. Watch out for those people, because a lot of times they're a bit soft, they're not in the game anymore, and so they may not be the most astute in order to lead your business in the right direction. And understand you can't please everyone. Someone is going to be upset. If you're a change agent, not all change is good, not all change is good for everyone involved, but if you get your company on the right track, that is good in the long term for the company. So what do we want to do? You want to reinvent the box. So I thought about this as a perfect example. Box, the company Box, now valued at $1.67 billion, started as a college project in 2005, 8 million users of cloud-based content management. So it's just basically cloud storage. And think about how many companies have been in that game. Excite, remember them? Excite.com, that was one of my first free email addresses way back in the 90s. And then one day they decided to switch over their whole service to a different provider, and I lost all these emails because I accidentally hit yes instead of no when something popped up on my screen. Well, that was a fatal error for Excite. That's why not many people know about Excite anymore. Well, now you've got Dropbox and Google and Glacier and Leonovis and Minio and Wasabi and all these other companies. They're all doing cloud storage. So the point is there are other business models out there right now that you can attack that it could be very lucrative. And in fact, just the other day, I had Usama Fayyad, who was one of the founders of the Hadoop ecosystem way back in his days in Yahoo. He kind of encouraged Yahoo to throw something back to the open source movement. And we were looking back at all the time that's passed, and he says that right now, for machine learning, the opportunities are so great, the low-hanging fruit is so prevalent. He gave me a quote for a good quote that I can use for a title of a book, plus or minus $1 million. His point was that there's so much value to be had by applying machine learning to business problems that pretty much no matter where you go, you'll make millions of dollars if you do it correctly. So let's think about this. Ecosystems are so important, and we'll talk about the different kinds of technologies that play into all of this right now. Interdependencies are everywhere. This is why you need design thinking. You need to recognize that there are changes all around us. Think about the cloud storage game. Well, Amazon S3, they had a 10-year advance, a 10-year head start on the rest of the competition, and that's why they're such a powerhouse today. But there are other companies out there vying for that market. There are always going to be new innovative technologies, especially when you have the cloud as a marshaling area. So think about network speeds. I remember actually it was probably 25 years ago when I had my first airport with the Macintosh, the little clamshell portable laptops, and the airport was the first consumer Wi-Fi that was available, and it blew my mind. I could sit on my front porch and do work. I remember showing it to my grandfather. I said, Grandpa, believe it or not, in a few years, you're going to be able to watch any movie you want streamed over this computer. And he was just amazed. He was stunned by that. That's how much disruption has already taken place in our market. That's what's happening right now. So design thinking is an ongoing process, and you really need to have some smart people in your organization who can think outside the box and consider these possibilities. So SMAC, Social, Mobile, Analytics, Cloud. I love talking SMAC. If you think about how much social has changed communication, we've gone from a push model to a pull model, basically, and now to a real peer-to-peer model where you could reach out and touch anyone, anywhere via social, whether it's Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram. It's everywhere. Every website has these different icons on their desktop. That's why it's such a huge force, and that's why you can tell it's such a huge force, because it's everywhere. You see it all over the place. These are new means of communicating to each other. These are new channels. Of course, it's not all good. The omni-channel reality is giving lots of us consternation. You have direct messages in Twitter, direct messages on LinkedIn, plus your emails, of course, text messages, SMS. It's kind of the Wild West right now, but it's all going to be coming together. I would predict in the next 3 to 5 years, all of these different Pandora's boxes are going to crystallize in a certain way, and the time really is now to plan for all of that. So as with all ecosystems, any one component that changes affects all the others. This gets us back once again to design thinking. And think about mobile, how mobile changes everything in terms of what you can buy, where you can buy it. Just the data that you can pull off mobile devices in and of itself is changing how we think about architectures, information architectures. We have IoT, which is basically turning information architectures inside out. So these are all opportunities and they're challenges at the same time. And analytics really needs to drive all of this stuff. If you think about the most innovative companies in the last 10 years or so, pretty much every one of them is using analytics to drive their enterprise, whether it's Uber or Airbnb or any of the new poster children, Amazon, of course. They're all using analytics to drive their businesses, to drive their decisions. And cloud, what could I say? Cloud is the ultimate marshaling area for data and for functionality. All the major vendors, the software vendors, are now focused on cloud, and there's a good reason for that because it is the future. So how can you fix your business? Well, find the friction. Wherever there are friction points, that's where you can focus on something, and what's the key? Automate, automate, automate. Automate every single thing that you can. I once had a guy from BP Logics on DM radio, and he laughed. He said, you should automate everything you possibly can in your business. Now, you always want to have the manual override. You always want to be able to hit that brake system when the automatic car does something it shouldn't do. But nonetheless, you want to automate stuff. You want visibility into that automation. And I would just say be prepared for a wild ride. It's going to be a very tumultuous, turbulent sort of period of time for the next probably 3 to 10 years. You heard Jim talking about autonomous cars being everywhere. There are some cities talking about banning cars, actual manually automated cars or manually run cars. We'll see how that happens and if that happens. But, and I'd like to put this slide up last, be prepared to cut your losses. One of the most dangerous things you can do in business and in life is refuse to admit when a battle is lost. This is a great graphic from Napoleon's march into Russia, which of course was largely his undoing. And just be prepared for that because things are changing and you want to make sure that you are not going to get disrupted in an adverse way. And with that, I'm going to bring on my other co-presenter calling in from the Netherlands, Ronald van Loon. Take it away, Ronald.
Thank you, Eric. And indeed, it all starts with design thinking. But you can ask the question, okay, what's next? Where does the rubber really meet the road? So businesses, they have to rely on data to drive their decision-making processes. But on the other hand, you have your gut instinct, and it still may play a very important role. So let me give you an example. A few months ago, I was talking to Guillermo Rebello, and he's the commercial manager at Innovicor. And this is a Latin American biggest healthcare complex for radio, for cardiac disease treatment, and for research. And we discussed their digital innovation success case at the intensive care unit. And this was based on a design thinking approach. And one of the primary challenges that a medical team in an intensive care unit has is the acquisition and the transcription of medical data. Since the equipment lacks interconnectivity, all the doctors and nurses have to be constantly on the round and must keep the records updated. So you can imagine this is really crucial in an ICU setting. And the cause of this lack of interconnectivity is that all the systems are proprietary. So systems from Siemens, from GE, from Toshiba, etc. And they cannot communicate with each other and with the different brands. So Guilherme, he explained me that in healthcare, the changes in processes can be very, very hard. But in this case, the doctors came up with the idea to connect all the different systems. And this was based on a team with 50 people, with many different disciplines, and based on a design thinking approach, and they managed this in just 6 weeks. So just think of the surgeon with this 25 years of experience. Now, when she works on a patient, she's using cameras to connect to digital monitors. She has patient's medical history. She has diagnostics, x-rays, scans. She has all kinds of sorts of digital equipment and is constantly monitoring her patient's vitals. And this in just one dashboard while she's performing her surgery. And this is supporting each decision she makes. And this was really a great step forward compared to all the separate systems they had before and all the different processes they had to basically manage their ICU. But her history as a surgeon, with all these different experiences, both successes, with failures, they're also guiding her. She uses her instinct. And these gut instincts still matter, of course. This is very important, and they still play a vital role even though analytics and solid data is supporting her to a successful surgical outcome. So if you look at just to the surgical example, businesses have to provide the context and drive their decisions based upon data. So analytics helps businesses to gain new insights, to create new processes that guide the business towards their decision-making capability. That's important. But when you start combining it with analytics with machine learning, businesses are able to implement new automated processes and new automated applications to increase their business performance, but also to augment their employees. So machine learning helps businesses to automatically identify risk, to generate actionable insights and make predictions based upon this new data. So let's discuss a new machine learning use case. A lot of companies may think that machine learning can only support with these huge industrial use cases, but it can also be used for smaller, simpler applications. For example, like a job recruitment. So if you are in HR, you can use machine learning to match specific job description qualifications with the qualities from resumes or from CVs. And machine learning can be applied to augment these type of tasks that are very repetitive, so that employees can use their skills on something that's more rewarding for them, and for the businesses that's more profitable. So businesses also need to be aware of overfitting their machine learning models. So let's take this CV matching example. Let's say we want to predict if a student will land a job interview based upon a resume. Now assume that we train a model from a data set of 15,000 resumes and their outcomes. Next, we try the model out on the original data set, and it predicts outcomes which has 98% accuracy. Wow, that's really great. But there's also some bad news. When we run the model on a new unseen data set of resumes, we only get 48% accuracy. And you think, okay, how is this possible, for God's sake? Our model doesn't generalize well from our training data to unseen data. And this is known as overfitting. And this is a common problem in machine learning and data science, and it happens every day. And as an example of overfitting, you can take the presidential election predictions. So, for example, predictions like, no president has won a third term, or no one under 45 has ever been elected. And there's a ton of similar types of predictions. So how to distinguish the signal from the noise, where the signal is the true underlying pattern that you wish to learn from the data. And the noise, on the other hand, refers to all this irrelevant information or randomness in this data set. A well-performing machine learning algorithm will separate the signal from the noise. If the algorithm is too complex or too flexible, it can end up memorizing all the noise instead of finding the signal. And this overfit model will then make predictions based upon that noise. It will perform unusually well on its training data, but it will very poorly perform on new unseen data. And if our model is much better on the training set than on the test set, then we're likely overfitting. So a tip to start with a very simple model to serve as a benchmark. And then as you can try all different kinds of more complex algorithms. And you have then a reference point to see if additional complexity is worth it. This basically brings us to big data. And big data represents real-world data set at scale. So organizations are facing challenges all related to new data coming in, raw data, IoT data. And the question becomes, how can we effectively handle all of this new data and these new data sources while still being mindful of data trust, data compliance, data governance, data quality? But we also want teams to work with this data in an agile and in a flexible way. So let's give a short explanation. We have these agile new data science tools like R, and on the other hand, we have data lake technologies like Hadoop. But they are treating data that's already in silos. On the other hand, we have the more rigid big data warehouses and these processes that take care for this data compliance and data quality. Very important, very crucial. So on one hand, we have to leverage what's there, so keep the new flexibility and the agility, but leverage the rigidity that meets the governance, the quality and the trust. And this is currently a main challenge for many, many organizations. So if we look from a global data landscape, it will be hybrid and it will be multi-cloud in the future. If you have this hybrid multi-cloud environment, then you really need a tool set to orchestrate all this data in all the different sources. And you can call it, for example, an operating system or the data hub for data management. And to make all this data available internally, but also to all your external partners, or you make it available data as a service, or data brokers, or all different kinds of applications, so that users can use their own BI. They can do their own data science, they can do their own visualizations, and they can do their own measures, all acting on the same data, the same compliance, the same quality, the same trust. So to summarize, to leverage what's there and to keep the new flexibility and agility, but to leverage the rigidity that meets the governance and trust in the organizations, you need to have technology that can take care of all of this new data and stay compliant without replacing all of your existing enterprise's assets. And the terminology that's used in the market for these type of solutions is, for example, a data hub or data management operating system. So what's the promise of big data? If we see all the marketing and all the ads, when big data is utilized effectively, organizations are better positioned and they will beat competition. And big data powers the ability to provide more improved personalized customer experience, drive growth and drive profit. That's a theory. But what's the reality? I want to discuss a very compelling big data case. This is a case from a company that started with big data late 1990s, when the word big data didn't even exist. It's the digital transformation case of the Relics Group. And the Relics Group is a $44 billion company and known for its brands like LexisNexis and like Elsevier. They transformed from having more than 50% of their turnover out of print, and they turned into a leading information and analytics company with less than 10% of their revenue coming from print now. And I think it's an example case for each company that needs to manage a digital transformation. And the Relics Group, they follow the strategy based on 4 pillars. The first pillar was very deep understanding and knowledge of their customers. And they have design thinking teams working with these customers, understand them to the finest detail. And the second pillar is having the best data sets. They have data sets from over 10,000 sources with over 65 billion data points. And the third pillar they have is sophisticated analytics combined with the fourth pillar, very powerful data management technology. So how does the Relics Group, how do they handle their data management? So they follow the process going from big data to small data. And it all starts with in-depth client understanding. Which valuable questions does your client want to answer? So for lawyers, what do they ask you to win cases? For doctors, what do they ask to save lives? And for insurance companies, what do they need to know to predict risks? So the question is, how does the Relics Group do this? Relics Group customers want to see small data that's accurate, that's concrete, that support their decision-making process. So Relics Group ingests thousands of quality of data sets from these 10,000 sources with many different formats. And in total, there's 65 billion data points. So the data is reduced in volume in favor for consistent quality. And they're following the process of grouping these data entities and then link these data entities to persons and to businesses. So they have a 360 view from the people and the businesses with all the assets and all the information. And then they score the data with smart algorithms to define the relevancy for all the different applications. And you can compare this with the Google relevancy if you try to search in the Google search engine. And the insights obtained are then calculated to get the best outputs for their customers and really defined on their needs, on the industry, on the country, which is all different. So for example, if you are a criminal defense lawyer in the US, you definitely need different data than your one in Germany or in the Netherlands. And I think the Relics Group digital transformation with the 4 pillars, the use of big data, machine learning, is really a great example for companies that are managing their digital transformation. So now let's move to the cloud, and I will start with an analogy. So let's say you're the world's renowned chef like Gordon Ramsay. Depending on the occasion or the setting, you're required to cook and to cater for 5 people at a private venue, for example. But sometimes you have to expand your menu to suit 500 people at a big event, like a business conference or a wedding. And as a chef, you need to be scalable with your menu. And you have to use different ingredients or different tools, different techniques, depending on the dish, on the menu, on your customer. You might even need to collaborate and partner with other chefs in order to integrate new cooking methods or to introduce new, innovative, exciting dishes. So in this analogy, the master chef is like the cloud, and Eric was already referring to it. It's so important, which is the flexible, scalable foundation for digital technologies which can support integration with other technologies and with other companies. So the cloud is the ultimate marshalling area for your data and all your functionality. The cloud acts as a foundation for an agile and optimized IT landscape for rapid digital transformation. The question is why? Because businesses can integrate, extend, or build innovative solutions and applications quickly to address all the business requirements. And if you build compelling applications quickly, you can improve the customer experience substantially over the multiple challenges. So the IT maintenance is also reduced substantially. No need to upgrade on-premise systems. And the cloud also provides reliable security and promotes collaboration across the teams and departments. So what does the cloud usage statistics tell us? Currently, the balance of cloud and on-premise solution is 40% to 60% respectively. But in 3 years, the statistics will flip. And the cloud will comprise 60%, and on-premise will be 40%. And is this only one cloud solution? I don't think so. The future vision for enterprises is a hybrid multi-cloud of both on-premise and public cloud solutions. Businesses can have their data hub or data management operating solution connected to any cloud system, whether it's Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, Amazon AWS, or SAP Cloud, or any other cloud, which makes it a very agile solution. And with this approach, new innovations can arise from combining solutions from all your partners in your ecosystem, because everybody is connected with everybody due to the Internet of Things. And you can integrate with third-party technologies. So to conclude, the cloud is an enterprise foundation to scale out business models and to scale out innovation. And I see a hybrid multi-cloud is really essentially as the mainframe of the future. And this brings me back to Jim. Jim, the floor is yours to continue with big data.
Thanks so much, Ronald, and a great segment. So I'm just going to ask some questions as to why we're seeing this incredible rise in big data. And part of it's being driven by consumers. So this is global internet use, and mobile has overtaken desktop. This is all the way back to a year ago, October 2016, which in turn means that it's no longer Windows that's king, it's Android. So the end users, the clients, are driving change through all organizations. And this is surprising, but app sales now exceed Hollywood box office revenue, and this is an ancient slide from all the way back to 2014. You know, if we look at the incredible amount of data that's being thrown off, we're creating more data in just 2 years than all human history combined. And you can look at the number of searches every single minute on Google, or the number of hours of Netflix, you know, almost 70,000 that are streamed every minute in 2017. So I love this. The CEO of Google said, we're moving from mobile first to AI first. In other words, being mobile first is so 2016. We're really now in the era of artificial intelligence, and it's just beginning. So we're going to see incredible things in terms of machine learning and neural networks and the applications for improving business. But we are just at the start, and there are some limits to it. Like, is this a blueberry muffin or is it a chihuahua? Hard to tell. And the AI can't always get it right. So, you know, we're going to see many more impacts to come because we are just at the start of this new era. And so with all these distributed points of presence, I want to look at the whole area of the Internet of Things and how that ties into blockchain. So the three of us were at the launch of Trenitalia's new high-speed train in Rome, Italy, about a year ago. And Trenitalia spends 1.4 billion euros a year on maintenance. And think about a train that comes into the station, and right by the stairs that come down, those doors will open 8 to 10 times during a stop. But at the far end of the platform, the doors on that car may not open at all. But historically, what we've done in maintenance is replace all the parts of all the doors every 18 months because that's the best we could do. But by installing 1,000 points of presence, we're able to measure the components in real time and see, oh, we need to change the doors by the platform every 16 months, not every 18 months. And we don't need to change the components on the doors at the end of the platform for 5 years. So we can actually increase safety. We can increase customer satisfaction. We can cut downtime and at the same time save money. So Trenitalia is going to be saving 10% of its budget by preventative maintenance. That's 140 million euros every single year by working, in this case, with SAP. So the industrial Internet of Things is an absolutely fantastic approach. Now, we always think about the Internet of Things in terms of consumer devices, right? But the industrial Internet of Things is really powerful for organizations in increasing value, increasing uptime, increasing customer satisfaction, and at the same time cutting costs. So we need to think far beyond this consumer industrial Internet of Things. It's predicted there are going to be 50 billion connected devices by 2020. So here I am in Davos at the World Economic Forum last year with Don Tapscott, who wrote The Blockchain Revolution. And blockchain is getting a lot of attention right now because Bitcoin, which is a cryptocurrency that uses blockchain technology, broke $17,000 recently. So it's had a almost 2,000% increase in value since January of this year. So that's getting a lot of media attention, but the more important technology is not the cryptocurrency, but the technology underneath it, blockchain itself. So why is this so important? Well, Eric already alluded to it. Think about this. The way we have historically worked in terms of our electricity needs is by having centralized production facilities that push electricity out to all of us. But imagine we end up with a more intelligent electric grid. So think about this. Your refrigerator's at home, it's running, so is your deep freezer, and you have a Nest or an Ecobee home temperature gauge that's Wi-Fi connected. Imagine your electric utility during peak electricity demand, which for us in North America is on a very hot summer day when we're all running our air conditioning. Your electric utility reaches out to your Ecobee or your Nest thermostat and says, look, hey, turn down for 5 minutes. It reaches out to your IoT fridge and your deep freezer. Turn off for just 5 minutes and we'll pay you $1.62. The blockchain ensures that contract happens. So it says, did the Nest thermostat actually turn down the AC for 5 minutes that we needed this, that we were at peak capacity? Yes, it did. Did the electric utility actually put $1.62 into my bank account? Yes, it did. In other words, the blockchain facilitates that transaction. And you can't put a human in the middle of that transaction because you can't afford to have a human in the middle of that negotiation when the entire price is $1.62. Not only that, humans don't scale because that negotiation is happening instantaneously in the run-up to peak with millions of different devices throughout the jurisdiction. So literally millions of electric fridges and deep freezers and thermostats are turning off for just 5 minutes and being paid $1.62 to do that, because that is infinitely cheaper than building new capacity. And so while blockchain is the technology that's going to revolutionize it. Right now, all the focus is on Bitcoin. And so we don't need to focus on Bitcoin. We need to actually look at the practical applications of blockchain. And so again, as we've gone through this seminar, you need to end up having a partner that is playing in every single one of these spaces that we're talking about as a technology partner, because you're going to need to play in all of them as well, sooner or later. And over to you, Eric.
Okay, folks, and I get to quote one of my favorite characters. Back in college, I did my thesis on The Zoo Story by Edward Albee, and the character Jerry has this amazing quote where he says, "Sometimes it's necessary to go a long distance out of the way in order to come back a short distance correctly." And wow, what a powerful comment that is. What a great insight. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. So you've heard us referencing these different technologies. And let's face it, there are lots of big software vendors in the world today. We now see, of course, Amazon moving into that space. Google is getting much more serious about its enterprise technologies. IBM, Oracle, SAP, of course, our sponsor today. And I have to say, in my personal opinion, the company that has figured it out, at least to this point, better than any of the others is, in fact, SAP with this new Leonardo offering that they've got. And there are 6 component parts here to the package: Internet of Things, design thinking, analytics, blockchain, machine learning, big data. There's also the whole concept of real-world data, the SAP Data Network for data and insights, which is also very fascinating stuff. And I'll just talk about that for a quick second. The SAP Data Network is focused on aggregating and anonymizing real-world data at scale. So one of the first solutions they've rolled out is for their field glass application for hiring people. Well, it's funny, this fits perfectly into something I've been pitching for the last couple of years, which is the concept of a jobs data lake. It's funny, in the world of information, where information is everywhere, why can't we get to the trustworthy information? I predict we're going to see something that would be called a sort of trusted data network coming out in the next few years, because there's so much information, but who can verify information? It's very difficult. That's where blockchain comes into play. It's where real-world data at scale comes into play. Well, what they've done with this field glass application is they've actually pulled transactional data from field glass, anonymized it, aggregated it, such that you can search through this application to see exactly, precisely how much a data engineer is making in Cincinnati versus Akron, Ohio, versus New York City versus Los Angeles. Imagine how much the world of business will change, of forecasting, of planning, if you know exactly what the numbers are. Well, trying to figure out what to ask for if you're an aspiring employee, that's always a big challenge. But if you know, if you have the real data to see, actually the average is $157,555, now you know the ballpark. You don't have to spend so much time trying to negotiate, going back and forth, wondering if you missed the boat, for example. This is the world of data that we live in today, folks. And so we wanted to show this slide to give you some perspective on where SAP Leonardo is coming from. And frankly, I think it's brilliant. I think it's spot on. They focus heavily on design thinking as the mechanism of action to get things rolling, to understand what to do. And then you have to piece these things together, because as any business person knows, that technology in and of itself is basically useless. You have to apply these technologies to specific use cases, and you have to do so effectively, of course, to get the job done. And with that, I'd like to segue into Q&A. We already have some great questions that have come in from the audience. So I'm going to throw one of these over to Ronald, and I'll throw one over to Jim, and maybe I'll chime in on one myself. Ronald, here's a really good question from an attendee. He says, how might AI and RPA impact accounting as a profession? Examples: auditing, invoicing, payroll. Think about how artificial intelligence can optimize the accounting process and make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's. But Ronald, what do you think about that?
So it's a nice question, because I had a webcast 2 weeks ago with KPMG, which is, I think, a renowned accounting firm. And basically they say they have been accountants for 100 years. But now if you look to the near future, then, for example, you have the self-driving car. And the self-driving car, you're sitting, and Jim was already telling about it, that you're sitting in the back of your car, and at a certain moment, somebody crossed the road, and you're going to hit him. So then the main question becomes, who is responsible? Who is to blame for this accident? And if the person is killed, what's going to happen? Is it the driver, but it's let's say an algorithm? Is it, for example, if you're driving in your Tesla, is it Tesla? Or the programmers from Tesla? So these type of questions become very relevant if the whole society is being controlled by algorithms. And another example, for example, was the shooter in Las Vegas. Google promoted the wrong shooter the first half hour. So who's to blame that they promoted in their rankings the wrong shooter? And the CEO from Google, he said, we are to blame. We define the algorithms, so we are to blame. But then the main question, and that's getting back to the answer, how do you keep the trust in all these algorithms? And what's the role of all these controlling firms? So KPMG, for example, is switching from, let's say, an accounting firm and giving a stamp on your annual report to a data assurance company, where they say, okay, we're going to control if you follow all the guidelines, all the governance, all the quality rules. Whether you stay within what we have discussed as a society is true and is relevant. And if you use your information correctly, if you don't pass any data privacy laws. So the role of accounting is moving from being an accounting firm, being a data assurance firm, and giving a stamp and controlling all the different companies, whether they treat data well.
That's a great answer. And, you know, Jim, I'm going to throw this one over to you about blockchain. One of the attendees is asking for other use cases around blockchain. You know, smart contracts are a big part of the blockchain because you can build in all sorts of different alerts and thresholds to change how things get done. And the point is, you're now automating the transfer of assets, right? So it's almost like you could hook a blockchain up to your E-Trade account to watch for all sorts of sophisticated changes in pricing and so forth. There's really no limit to what it can do in terms of automating contracts and decisions, right?
Absolutely, but the industries it applies to are absolutely far-ranging. You know, in the music industry, for instance, we used to need intermediaries in order to promote artists. But now, if I can buy a song directly from the artist, why do I need a music label? So the song can get downloaded from the artist, the digital rights management piece are embedded in the song, and the, you know, dollar payment goes to the artist. So it's going to enable it's going to lower the barrier to entry for entrepreneurs in, say, the music industry, but any other industry. It means that Ronald was just talking about large accounting firms. Large accounting firms have had an advantage of being trusted, but the blockchain brings trust to transactions. So it's interesting that the large accounting firms are saying, we're moving our primary value from being trusted and being able to see things to data assurance and making sure that the data has integrity, because there are processes companies have to put in place. So what it does is it changes what is value that you as a company or you as an industry are providing to your customers. If all of a sudden the simple routine things are eliminated, you have to innovate to add more value. So that's the implication of blockchain. But again, just like AI, we are at such early stages. And while Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, it's about the value of the currency, Ethereum, which is another cryptocurrency, and the coin is Ether, builds contractual aspects into the code that Bitcoin doesn't have. So Bitcoin, you trade like an asset, or you send money to someone via Bitcoin. But Ethereum, built into the platform, has these contractual hooks. Back to you, Eric.
Yeah, and Ronald, I'd like to bring you in on this conversation too. So let's just talk about the blockchain a bit more. There is, of course, the initial blockchain, which underpins Bitcoin, but blockchain as a concept has now spun out. And frankly, one of the folks I know who is one of the most knowledgeable guys in the business told me he has never seen a type of technology take off as quickly as blockchain has in the last couple of years. And I think really the big question is going to be whose blockchain? Because there is this initial blockchain that underpins Bitcoin, but now other vendors, including IBM and SAP and others, are all building proprietary blockchains. Because I think the key to success with blockchain, to Jim's point, is trust, is whose blockchain should I trust? So what do you think about proprietary blockchains from vendors versus the original blockchain in terms of trusted networks?
So I think what you hit the nail on, you said it right, it's trust. So if you go back to the core, it's how to create trust. And whether you had, let's say, 10 years ago, and we were having an agreement with 10 companies, 100, in the financial system, where we say, hey, this is the dollar, this is the euro, and there's some valuable gold underneath it. We all trust it. So it's all a system based on trust. And I think over here as well, it will be the question, which system, which blockchain will get the trust from the right people, and these type of blockchains will win. It's hard to say whether it's proprietary or whether it's certain vendor. I think it's a matter of, what's going to happen in the market. We have to see, and we will see different developments, and they will go so fast. And the ones who create the massive trust from most relevant companies and relevant people is going to win.
I want to jump in, Eric, just with one more thing, which is, of course, the big threat, the big disruption that blockchain brings is to traditional financial institutions. So there's something called the remittance market. So if you have a Filipino nanny, she sends $200 back to the Philippines to her family every 2 weeks. And the banks right now are taking 11.18% as a transactional fee, which is usurious. But if you look at the technology of blockchain, it can facilitate that transfer for only 0.25%, which is more than 40 times less. Now, your Filipino nanny isn't a blockchain miner, so she's not going to be getting the 0.25, but that is so inexpensive. There are third parties that are evolving that will facilitate that transfer for 2.5%, which is 5 times less than the banks are charging. So this is a threat to the very fat margins that financial services companies have enjoyed until this point, and which is why you hear them denigrating, at least publicly, blockchain, it's a bubble, and it's, it's being used by criminals, just like, banks never have laundered money. No, never. So, the PR that you hear coming out of large financial institutions against blockchain, against Bitcoin, is really self-serving because they see the writings on the wall that their fat margins are about to be hammered, and that these banks, which are slow-moving, large organizations tend to be slow-moving, are going to have to start innovating really quickly.
Yeah, and just as a quick aside, I've been using Zelle QuickPay through Chase lately to send money to folks because, frankly, I'm just not good at mailing stuff. I really have just always had an issue with getting out the envelope, putting all the writing on there, et cetera. Now you can send it through QuickPay for no charge at all. Well, it used to be you would get a $5 or a $10 or a $50 charge to send money like that. So this is the handwriting on the wall, folks. This is the straws in the wind. And I'd like to throw one last question. I know, Jim, you have a hard stop. I'll throw this question over to you, Ronald, first. Watch out for background noise, folks. But there's a question about cloud and responsibility of the cloud. And I've looked into this in terms of security. And obviously, Amazon is a very secure environment. Microsoft Azure, you have to think, is a very secure environment. These companies can afford to pay the best and the brightest. They can afford the best technologies to manage security, but no internet-based system is ever completely secure. I think anyone in the business long enough knows that. You can always hack any system. So the question becomes, who's responsible? So like a GDPR breach, for example, the Global Data Protection Regulation, I did some research on this, and my understanding is there's a term called the shared responsibility model with these big cloud vendors, and it's a bit of an ironic term because it basically means they have no responsibility and you have all responsibility, because otherwise you have to prove that something they did wrong resulted in the breach, and good luck getting that done. But this is an interesting question from an attendee. If there's a GDPR breach in your, let's say, Amazon cloud, who's responsible for that? My opinion is you're responsible, not Amazon. But Ronald, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's a chain of responsibility. So whoever discovers a breach, he has to inform his whole chain. So from storage up to companies that use the data. So if you have a device, so you have a remote control and you're connected either to TV devices, you are connected to, let's say, your lamps, to all kinds of different systems at home, and there's a breach that people hack your system, you have to inform within 72 hours the whole chain, and it's chain responsibility. So I don't think, because everything is connected, you cannot point just at one person and say, hey, you're to blame. It's a responsibility, and you have to inform the whole chain, and you have to take proper actions. And as you said, nothing is 100% secure, so these things will happen. There will be people that make mistakes, but also systems will be hacked. So it's going to be a chain responsibility. If you don't act properly, yeah, then you're basically liable, and then the penalties can increase quite steeply and quite quickly to tremendous amounts. So I don't think there's really one company you can blame if something happens.
Yep, and we have one last comment here, and maybe Jim, if you're still around, you can comment on this, and I will. One of the attendees writes, is the world really lacking trust to that point, the only reason why we consider blockchain? I think the short answer is no, but the fact is we are entering a whole new phase of interconnected systems with blockchain as the underpinning technology, the girders, if you will, that are holding up all these different systems. And I think transparency is going to be key. We have this whole open source movement that really changed software development, and I think that transparency is the way of the future. But then again, Amazon isn't very open about their code either. So Jim, any closing thoughts on that?
So yeah, I'd say that it's not about lack of trust when the electric utility is going to pay me $1.62 for cycling down my heat or my AC when it's peak electricity. It's about that you can't afford to put a human in the middle of that transaction, and the human can't scale to do that in 5 minutes with millions of negotiations. So it's not that we don't trust, it's that the trust is built in to the technology to make sure that my AC unit turned off or cycled down for 5 minutes.
Yeah, I have a nice example. Yeah, I have a nice example. So you have, for example, Tinder. There was a journalist who did some research in Tinder, and what kind of information Tinder did store in the past year and a half, and she got back 800 pages of personal information. So Tinder was transparent, said, okay, this is what we stored, but it didn't help with the trust, because if you get back 800 pages of information about yourself from 1 year and a half of being on Tinder, it doesn't help with the trust. Either when she asked, okay, can you then explain how you use the data? Can you make clear what kind of algorithms you use? They didn't give this because they said, okay, it's proprietary information and we cannot share this. But if they would it give trust? How many people do understand algorithms, and how many people do see the consequences from the algorithms? And this is basically then back to the discussion from which organization is going to help in the world creating and generating this trust, do all kinds of checks. Is it the blockchain? are these typical organizations like whether they're now the accountancy firms, and that's something that I think will show up in the future. But trust is not transparency. Trust has to do with many more things, and companies that are fully transparent is not sure that they will be trusted. I think if Google shows everything what they do, I'm not sure if everybody will trust them anymore.
That's funny. And one last question I'll throw out to both of you. What would be the impact of quantum computing on blockchain technology? I have to say, I don't know. Jim? He may have jumped. Or he's not.
I pass this on to you, Eric.
Okay, we're going to have to look into this because I'm not entirely sure. Quite frankly, I understand the concepts of quantum physics. I do not fully understand the concepts of quantum computing, and I can say even artificial intelligence, one of the challenges that we have right now is that it's hard to unwind what some of these algorithms do, especially once they're set and they start humming along. Trying to figure out what they actually did to come up with a price is not the easiest thing in the world. So this is a bit of the scary black box side of artificial intelligence that sometimes we just don't even know how they do what they do. But I can tell you that what I heard from Hans Talbauer of SAP is that some of the biggest brands in the world right now are letting machine algorithms run their digital supply chain. So if that's not a testament to the power of AI in at least digital supply chain, I don't know what is. And folks, that's going to wrap it up for us. Thank you so much for checking out our inaugural episode of Fast Forward, the Future of Business. We do archive all these webcasts for later viewing. Feel free to come back anytime. We should have the archive posted very shortly, in fact, and we'd be curious to hear your thoughts. And thanks for these fantastic questions as well. So with that, we're going to bid you farewell, folks. Take care. Bye-bye.